Hello everyone, it's Braids by Elon and I'm here with another video. Be sure to like and comment and subscribe down below. Also check out my Instagram and TikTok account at Braids by Elon. Thanks for watching. Okay, so here I'm just gonna prep the hair for party. I'm gonna go through without putting any product on just to do kind of a rough draft because once you put the product on it starts to mold a little bit. So I'm just gonna give like a rough draft of the shape. And because I'm gonna do crisscross, I guess zigzag, I don't know if you know how to draw zigzag on a paper, but it's kind of the same process where you start from the bottom, go up, and then go down. So I essentially parted the triangle first, and then I added a little bit of product once I got it to the shape that I like, and I'm just gonna mold it with the product a little bit. The product keeps from having a lot of flyaways, so that's why I like to apply it as I'm parting, because it'll keep the part consistent as I go all the way back. Because the thing about feed ends, you have to plan it out. I typically start in the center and then I work my way to the side, but I've already have planned it out before I even start parting. So I come from the front, look at their head, and then I kind of imagine how I'm going to part it, and then I kind of do a rough draft. And then I start from the middle. That's why I typically do 6, or if you were to do 5. But either way, you got to choose a good starting point. I've started from the sides before. It looked horrible because it kind of looks like shifted. So I typically go directly in the center and start from there. And then just make sure everything is symmetrical at that point. So that's why I recommend starting in the middle. So the middle braid is already done, which is making it a little bit easier for me in terms of doing the side braids now. And I just kind of work from one side to the next. So I've already done the braid that's going to be symmetric to this braid that I'm parting right now has already been completed on the other side. And then I'm going to complete this one, and then I'm going to go back to the other side and then come back to this side, oscillating between the two. That's what I do to keep the symmetry and to make sure that it's consistent. So I'm just going to zigzag the part all the way down, and then when I get to the very back, it just kind of go straight down to her neck. Because the thing about the feet ends, obviously you have less area of hair in the back of your head than the front of your head, so the spacing is more limited. So I usually like the part of the hair that I leave out to braid in the back of the neck is obviously much smaller. So I typically don't zigzag all the way down. Once I get to the last zigzag, I just kind of go straight. So I'm just prepping the hair for the braid. I use Shiny Jam. I'll have it linked below so you guys can check it out on Amazon if you would like to purchase it. I feel like that it didn't work on everyone's hair, so sometimes I'll mix it. I have a really strong edge control. I'll hopefully be getting that up on Amazon as well. But yeah, so I'm just gonna go through and prep it, which is a very important step when doing feed in / stitch braids. Like, you do not want to rush this part, because if you do, it will affect the way that the braid looks in the end. You cannot rush this part. There's a reason why, even though it seems simple, like, oh my god, it's just 6 braids, there's a reason why people typically charge what they do, because they require a lot of skill. It's one of the most difficult braid styles I've had to learn how to do. And if you follow me on Instagram, or if you check out my other videos on here, I do a lot of very intricate braid styles. And I feel like that this is a skill that once you learn how to do feed in / stitch braids, you can really get creative with the things that you do. But it is a very difficult skill, I feel like, for me to acquire, was to do in feed in braids. So I'm just going to go by in the front. When I started out, I part a bigger patch, and then I'm using my nails here. If you do not have acrylic nails or fake nails, you can always use a comb. And I'm just grabbing a piece, going in, parting it from one side to the other. And you want to part as deep as you can so that you're not snagging hair in the middle. I know some people, they'll part it down so that they can make sure that the stitching on both sides is like perfectly even. I don't do that. Obviously, this video is also, I've gotten a little bit better with my stitching since this video. I was fairly new in the process when I created this video. I made this video almost 2 years ago. So I'm much more skilled now, but the basis still is very important and it's still relevant. So I just take my index finger and I braid with my index finger, but I use my ring finger for stitching. And I just gather the hair to the middle. I think a better method of using your nail would be using the Gothic nails, and you can buy those off Amazon too. That's typically what I like to use now, because I don't like the hair product getting stuck under my natural nail. It creeps me out and I'm always having to keep washing my hands. I don't like it. So I either use the Goth nail or a comb, and that way you could be consistent even if you don't have your nails done. If you're watching this and you're learning from this and you just want to practice, you probably won't have the acrylic shaped a certain way so that you can use the fake nail to stitch, because I have my nail kind of shaped in like a sharp triangular manner so that I can use it as so that it's pointy. So you can do the same thing with a comb. You're just pulling it in, pulling the hair into the braid as you go. You're separating as you go, and that's what creates the stitching. Now, I will say that after a few days or so, the stitching kind of wears away in terms of definition, but it's still a much nicer braid than if the braid was not stitched. Because the thing about using the stitching method, the braid lay much flatter, because you're essentially like separating it all the way down to the flattest point as you're braiding. So the braid lays really flat when you're stitching it. I feel like it creates a much more consistent braid, a much more polished braid. So I think that it's a good skill to learn, especially if you like braiding your hair or if you braid other people's hair. It's worth it. Okay, so with this braid, I'm doing the same thing. I'm going triangular. This braid is going to be obviously a little bit smaller. Your hair is usually thinner on the sides, and don't be afraid of the thinness of the hair. It actually makes it a little bit easier to stitch it when the hair is a little bit thinner. And I feel like that's why usually the braids on the side that are stitched, you can really see the stitch pattern so much better. It's so much clearer. It's much more definition to it, because usually people's hair is thinner on the sides. So I'm just going to part it. I'm just prepping it. And I will say that the hardest two braids to do in this process is always the center. It always takes twice as much time to do the center two braids, because that establishes the whole head. So yeah, I'm just going to keep lathering it with product and smoothing it out. Trying leaving her edges out kind of the way that I have them combed out at first. I'm going to style them afterwards, so that's also just parting them out, just leaving out what I'm going to leave out. And this part is a little bit easier than I feel like the other braids. I feel like this is kind of the easiest part. The further you get out from the center, it gets a little bit easier, but it makes it a little bit harder to add as much detail around the ear. So I'm just going to part it and try and keep the same zigzag notion as consistent as possible, as best as I can, while keeping the frame of the 6 feet ends around her head. Just trying to make them as even as possible. And I'm going to slick that down really well, because I want the braid to lay really flat, because the flatter it lays when I do it, the better it will preserve. So when she's wearing it, if she wears a headscarf, it'll stay in good shape for a long period of time. So I'm going to do the same thing. I just slicked it down on both sides of the braid, and then I'm stitching it using my fingernail, essentially scooping a small piece of the hair and pulling it to the braid piece by piece. This notion provides a more sleek look with the braid. It makes the braid look more detailed, and I think it makes the braid last a little bit better too, much less frizz. So I'm just going to do that, and you guys are watching me. And the next braid, I'm actually going to do it a little bit slower, so I think it has a little bit better angle. This one, you're kind of watching it from one angle. But I'm doing the same thing on the side of the braid that you can't see as on the side that you can see. And with the time, you'll just get more consistent with the stitches. You'll kind of get a feel the same way you do when you feeding in the hair to measure like how big of a braid you do. You'll get a feel in your hands about how much hair you want to pull into the braid as you're stitching, and that'll determine the way that it looks once it's finished. And you know, you just try and keep your consistency going as you're stitching, because once you stop, it's kind of harder to, you know, keep yourself going. But you'll just get better with time. Just keep practicing. This video, I made this video almost 2 years ago, and if you look at my stitch braids more recently, they look so much better than they did even then. So it's like, just keep practicing. That's the thing about, you know, with braiding hair, you'll just get better with time. You're not going to start out perfect, and you shouldn't expect that. That's okay. Just keep practicing, keep researching, keep watching videos, and keep practicing. So I'm sitting out her edges. I'm not going to put anything on them, because when I lay the edges, I don't put any jam on the edges. I just use my edge control. If I put jam on there and try the edge control, it's going to be too gunky, and the edge control won't work as well. So I'm just going to put some jam on it, keeping her edges separate. I'm using the jam in the yellow jar because her hair texture is pretty like straight already. But if you have more coarse hair, then I would probably go with the jam in the orange jar. I think it's a much stronger hold. But either way, whichever one you use, you need to comb it. You know, comb the jam through it. That's really what makes the jam work. If you don't comb it through, it's not going to sleek the hair down. I know a lot of people use a brush, but I think that the comb is much more efficient. So I'm just going to sleek it down, and then I'm going to part it. A thick enough piece, because I don't want too much tension on her edges. So the piece that I part out to start with, I like to make it pretty thick. And I'm just going to start braiding as I would a regular braid, and then I'm going to start feeding it. I'm not adding weave to her, so I'm sorry. I'm not going to start feeding it. I'm just going to start stitching. If I were adding weave, I would start adding weave after I started the braid. So that's why. But yeah, I'm going to do the same thing. And I think that this braid on both sides near the ear is the easiest braid for this hairstyle, because the hair is usually a little bit thinner right there, and you've already parted it on the other side, so you're not parting anymore. The other hair is already put up, so you're not fighting with the flyaways from the other braids, and you just, you know, pull the hair piece by piece as best you can. Obviously, once you get so far to the back of the hair, you're not really going to be able to stitch anymore, especially if their real hair is like thick enough, it's full enough, because you can't really see as much of the scalp. So with this, I'm just adding just a little bit of hair on that piece just to seal it off, because that piece was a little bit thinner, and I just don't want the braid to be covered down at all, even though I'm going to put it in the buns. So we did 2 buns in the back. She absolutely loved it. She looked gorgeous. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please comment any other styles that you want me to try. Also, check out my other videos on my channel. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you are able to learn something. And please share.
You look so pretty. Oh, yeah. Man, you look so beautiful. This makes me so happy. Like, I'm telling you, it's nothing like when I get done